Does Colossians chapter 1 verse 15 teach that Jesus is a created being? Let's get into it. About a month ago, I put a video on my channel about what to say to a Jehovah's Witness if they knock on your door. And we went to Colossians chapter 1 verse 16, where it says all things were created through Christ and for Christ, which shows that he himself is not a created being. And then we went to the New World Translation, which adds the word other there, so it says all other things were made through Christ and for Christ. And then we went to Papyrus 46, which is our earliest manuscript of Colossians, and showed that the Greek manuscript does not have the word other there, and neither does any of the other manuscripts. And one common objection I got to this was to go to Colossians chapter 1 verse 15 to show that Jesus is in fact a created being, and in the New World Translation, they're just making what was implicit in verse 15 explicit in verse 16. But is that really what verse 15 is teaching? Colossians 1:15 says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation." So they're really going to focus on this word firstborn, which is prototokos in the Greek, to show that Jesus is in fact a created being. But is that what firstborn necessarily means? It's really important to note that Paul is speaking within a Jewish context, and this word firstborn has two different meanings. It can mean firstborn within time, or it can mean preeminence and rank. And I'll show this using two Old Testament passages that Paul might have been referring to when writing Colossians chapter 1 verse 15. Exodus 4:22 says, "You must say to Pharaoh, 'This is what the Lord says, Israel is my firstborn.'" And keep in mind, Israel is not the first nation. They literally came from Egypt, another nation. And so this is referring to the fact that God chose Israel as the means through which the Messiah would come. They are preeminent. In Psalm 89 verse 27, speaking about David, it says, "I will also make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth." So this makes the idea even more explicit. David, not being the first king of Israel, remember Saul was king before him, but he is the firstborn king. He is the preeminent one among all the other kings on the earth. So what we're going to do is we're going to read Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 20. We'll get the whole context, and then I'll let you decide. Is Paul teaching that Jesus is a created being within time, or is he teaching that he is preeminent and above creation, actually affirming his deity rather than disconfirming it? He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For all things in heaven and on earth were created by him. All things, whether thrones or dominions, whether principalities or powers, all things were created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and all things are held together in him. He is the head of the body, the church, as well as the beginning, the firstborn from among the dead, so that he himself may become first in all things. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in the Son, and through him reconcile all things to himself, by making peace through the blood of his cross. Through him, whether things on earth or things in heaven. So in context, we see Paul affirm that Christ is before all things, he created all things, he's the head of the church, he holds all things together, he reconciles all things to himself, he is first among all things, and he is the one who reconciled the world to himself through the cross. And it's important to remember that Paul was Jewish before he converted to Christianity, and he has a lot of these Old Testament passages in mind when he's writing this letter. And so, do you think it's really plausible that he's saying that Jesus is created within time? Or does it seem fairly obvious that he's saying exactly the opposite? M.J. Harris notes, the firstborn was either the eldest in a family or a person of preeminent rank. The use of this term to describe the Davidic king in Psalm 89:27, where it says, "I will also appoint him my firstborn, the most exalted of the kings of the earth," indicates that it can denote supremacy in a rank as well as priority in time. The emphasis in Colossians 1:15 is on the priority of Jesus' rank as over and above creation. So no, prototokos, Colossians 1:15, none of this teaches that Jesus is created within time. It actually affirms the opposite. And so we should continue to say that the New World Translation has edited Colossians chapter 1 verse 16 in order to fit their theology when they say that all other things were made through Christ. We should instead go with what the manuscripts say, take out the word other, and affirm the deity of Christ. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Give it a thumbs up, share it, do all that great stuff. This has been The Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman. We'll see you around.